Star Trek, Primitive Passenger Season 2, Episode 10, Trajectory. The vast expanse of space stretched endlessly beyond the Havok's viewports, a silent testament to the lonely journey Nolan Mercer had embarked upon. Inside the ship's bridge, the air hummed with the quiet efficiency of advanced technology, punctuated only by the occasional beep of a console or the soft whir of a holographic display adjusting. Nolan sat in his command chair, his fingers banging away at the translucent controls before him. The stark contrast between the darkness of space and the vibrant displays cast an ethereal glow across his features, highlighting a face etched by centuries of life and adventure. "Cargo transfer complete at Outpost 47, Alara's disembodied voice announced, breaking the contemplative silence. "Shall I set course for our next delivery?" Nolan nodded, suppressing a yawn. "Yeah, go ahead. But let's take it slow this time. Our Tellaride friends might get suspicious if we show up too quickly." As the Havok steamed on to its next destination, Nolan found his mind wandering. The thrill of building his trade empire had become unadulterated boredom, replaced by a gnawing sense of routine. He'd become a master of time and space, yet somehow the days seemed to blur together. His great warship, his brilliant AI, reduced to humping cargo and serving customers. Wah! The Havok's comm system chirped, interrupting Nolan's brooding. "Incoming transmission from the Bellerophon, sir," Ilara announced. Nolan sighed, straightening in his chair. "Put it through." Captain Vex's anxious face appeared on the view screen. "Mr. Mercer, I'm sorry to bother you, but we've hit a snag at Starbase 173. The dock manager won't clear us for unloading. Says our manifest doesn't match their records. Didn't we triple-check that manifest before departure?" Nolan pinched the bridge of his nose, feeling a headache brewing. "Yes, sir. It's their system that's faulty, but they won't budge." Paused. "I'm sorry to get you involved, sir, but we're already late to pick up our backhaul." Nolan nodded curtly. "I'll handle it. Sit tight, Vex." The transmission cut off, replaced by the Starbase's insignia. "Alara, get me that pencil pusher of a dock manager." After a moment, a harried-looking Bolian appeared on screen. "This is Kren. Please make it quick. I'm very busy." Nolan plastered on his most charming smile. "Manager Kren, Nolan Mercer here. I understand you have a problem with one of my ships." Kren suddenly focused on his display, his expression somewhat alarmed. Mr. Mercer, yes. Your Bellerophon's manifest is inconsistent with our records. We can't risk." "Now, Mr. Kren," Nolan interrupted smoothly, "we both know my manifests are always in order. Why don't you take another look? I'm sure you'll find everything's just as it should be." Kren frowned, tapping at his console. His eyes widened slightly. It seems there was a glitch in our system. The manifest checks out, sir." Nolan's smile never wavered. "Wonderful. I trust the Bellerophon will be cleared for immediate unloading." Yes, Kren muttered, looking flustered. "Clearance granted. My apologies. Listen out." As the screen went dark, Nolan's smile fell away. He slumped back in his chair, suddenly feeling every one of his centuries in the back of his neck. "Ilara," he said quietly, "am I going to spend the rest of my 3,000 years doing this? Aren't there any wars to fight? There has to be someone out there who needs to be killed." Ilara's voice was gentle when she replied, "Your frustration is understandable, Nolan. But perhaps there are other ways to find fulfillment beyond violence." Nolan snorted. "Like what?" "Solving bullshit bureaucratic hiccups for the rest of eternity." Ilara's silence was telling. Nolan stood abruptly, his restlessness palpable. "I need some air," he muttered, then chuckled darkly at the absurdity of the statement in the vacuum of space. He made his way to the Havok's cavernous hold, where the Maldor awaited. The little brick, responsive to Nolan's very thoughts, hummed to life as he approached. Without a word, Nolan boarded, and the small ship detached from its docking clamps. As the Maldor glided through the vast expanse of the hold, Nolan felt that familiar, I got to get out of the house. Desperation gnawing at him, but this time it was different. This wasn't his typical agitation, the kind that could be soothed by a wild trip to some hedonistic planet or a raucous space station. No, this ran deeper. Nolan needed to find a purpose. He guided the Maldor along the impressive array of ships he'd collected over the decades. Massive passenger liners designed for both luxury and economy travel floated silently beside menacing warships from a dozen different species. Tactical frigates, nimble fighters, and swarms of smaller craft filled the spaces between. Each vessel told a story, a reminder of past adventures and hard-won victories. But now they sat idle, gathering dust in the belly of the Havok. Nolan's mind drifted back to the early days, when he'd felt lucky for the opportunity to mine a little trilithium. Back then, every small success had felt monumental. Now, his trade empire straddled two quadrants, influencing galactic politics on a scale he'd never imagined possible. And yet, that sense of accomplishment had long since faded. As the Maldor drifted past a Klingon bird of prey, its fierce visage a stark contrast to its current dormant state, Nolan felt a pang of longing for the days when every encounter held the promise of danger and excitement. "Elara," he called out, knowing she could hear him, "even here, when was the last time we did something?" "I don't know. Meaningful." "Define meaningful, Nolan," came the AI's measured response. "Our trade operations have stabilized economies across multiple sectors." "Wow." Nolan reacted flatly. "Stabilized economies. We've prevented at least 3 wars through strategic resource allocation and taking the Zalaxians out of the picture. Just last month, our medical supplies saved an entire colony from a viral outbreak, Juma fever." Nolan sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Well, saving folks from pooping themselves to death, now that's meaningful. I feel better already." There was a pause before Elara spoke again, her tone softer. "You miss the uncertainty, don't you? The thrill of not knowing if you'll make it through the next crisis." "Maybe," Nolan admitted, guiding the Maldor around a cluster of sleek Andorian fighters. "Or maybe I'm just tired of playing it safe. We have all this power, all these resources. Shouldn't we be doing something bigger with them, more than preventing wars and saving lives?" Elara asked, a hint of amusement in her voice. Nolan chuckled despite himself. "Yeah, something way bigger." The Maldor glided to a halt before a towering Zalaxian warship, its sleek lines and predatory profile a testament to its creator's mastery of space combat. Nolan's eyes traced the vessel's contours, his mind already buzzing with possibilities. He'd taken to calling this particular ship Carol, though the reason for the moniker was known only to him. "I'm going to spend some time with Carol," Nolan announced, a taste of resolve in his voice that had been absent for too long. "She needs some sprucing up. Should I be jealous?" Elara's disembodied voice carried a hint of playful sarcasm. Her tone shifted to one of surprise as she added, "Hey, wait, why have you activated every tender in the bay?" A mischievous grin spread across Nolan's face. "Sprucing, Elara. Lots of sprucing." What followed was a whirlwind of activity that defied conventional measures of time. Nolan, driven by a newfound sense of purpose, threw himself into the project with abandon. His circadian rhythm, long since divorced from any planetary cycle, stretched and compressed like an accordion played by a monkey. Sometimes he'd work for what felt like days on end, his focus laser-sharp as he pored over schematics and tweaked systems. These marathon sessions often lasted 70, 80, even 90 hours, fueled by nothing but determination and the occasional stimulant. When exhaustion finally claimed him, he'd collapse into a deep slumber for a solid 20 hours, only to emerge ready to dive back in. Other times, particularly when juggling the demands of his vast trade empire, Nolan's days would shrink to mere 4-hour bursts of frenetic activity, punctuated by brief 2-hour catnaps. It was during these periods that the Havok's corridors would echo with his rapid-fire instructions and negotiations, the air thick with the urgency of deals being struck and empires being built. But now, with Carol as his singular focus, Nolan lost himself in the work. The Zalaxian warship became his canvas, and he, the artist, reimagining her very essence. Carol's unsesmooth hull underwent a dramatic transformation. Nolan painstakingly applied an advanced ablative armor, each plate a marvel of engineering drawn from the depths of Alara's vast database. The result was a masterpiece of defensive technology, a hull that could shrug off energy weapons and withstand physical impacts. The ship's profile changed subtly but significantly. What were once sharp edges became even more refined, honed to a lethal sleekness that whispered of speed and maneuverability. Carol's engines received a complete overhaul, their output boosted to levels that would make even the most daring pilot salivate. But it was within Carol's cavernous interior that Nolan truly let his imagination run wild. The ship's original capacity for 220 crew members now seemed absurdly generous for his needs. 2 large cargo holds and a massive shuttle bay, once essential for a warship of Carol's class, now lay empty, begging to be repurposed. And repurpose them Nolan did. Those spaces became home to an array of secondary weapon systems, each more formidable than the last. Experimental phasers nestled alongside banks of quantum torpedoes. A sensor-masked mine layer found its home where crew quarters once stood. In one corner, an industrial replictor hummed quietly as it built pieces needed for defense satellites and autonomous weapons platforms. When Nolan finally emerged from his work, blear-eyed but triumphant, Carol was unrecognizable. Gone was the Zalaxian warship of old. In its place floated a vessel of terrifying beauty and devastating potential. Her flat black hull seemed to drink in the light, giving her an almost ghostly appearance in the vast hold of the Havok. Nolan jumped into the modified command center of his creation, only about 15 feet across, and sat down into what used to be the ship's bridge. "What do you think, Carol? Do you feel like a new woman?" As he tapped controls and brought the engines online. He'd test-fired them indoors before install, but wasn't really sure of the net effect just yet. Oh, and Carol never answered him. Nolan talked to her just the same. He wondered if he was even able to pilot a ship and be silent at the same time, outside of the maul door anyway. He entered the quick blink, and then a white flash appeared outside of the Havok's equally black hull. Nolan thumped away at the console and brought up a satellite image of the Havok. He zoomed to an impossibly small shadow just off the bow. There she sat. Carol, in evening attire. "Damn kitten, you're ready to go." Nolan closed his eyes for a moment and remembered Kitten's mission. Carol's mission. "Let's go," he whispered while tapping in the coordinates. Again the ship blinked out of sight, above a familiar spot of a planet Nolan hadn't seen in 70 years. It haunted his dreams for decades. He always hated that he hadn't gone back. He never really understood why. It just seemed the longer he was gone, the more pointless it was to go back. Initial scans show the world wasn't quite what it was all those decades ago. Nolan had left the Borg refugees on a green, lush planet. It had plenty of flora and fauna, easy enough to catch and eat. He left them with years' worth of rations, replicators for food and supplies, and plenty of backup and rechargeable power cells. Now, it appears the opposing hemisphere has suffered some catastrophe. The one continent on the northern hemisphere is now barren, mostly bare rock, and the planet itself has taken on sort of a wobbling rotation. However, on this side of the planet, where Nolan was in geosynchronous orbit, both continents seem nearly untouched. Lots of sentient life forms running around. Many more than before. Nolan couldn't tell who was who down there. He didn't have adequate scans from 70 years ago. "You're going to be all right if I head down for a little bit." Switching Carol to autopilot bridge. He tapped his comm badge and beamed himself to the other side of the small command center. "That'll do. Send me to the surface." He double-tapped again and disappeared in a swirl of silver light. Nolan appeared 100 yards or so into some trees on the edge of a settlement just after dark. He made his way toward the light and noise, pulling a hooded jacket out of his pack. He was lucky it was chilly. He could hide his features under the jacket and his blaster. Coming into the edge of town, there were plenty of humanoids walking around. His translator picking up snippets of language from passers-by and settling on a complete, cohesive language. It still made his head hurt a little bit, probably psychosomatic, he always told himself. The people around him seemed to be of many races, but also had many similarities, many sharing a ridge running along their skull like a short mohawk. Most carried what appeared to be advanced communication devices. None seemed to have weapons. Everything else about the town seemed, well, a bit backward. He didn't see any vehicles for land or air travel. Houses were basic stick and brick 1- and 2-story plans. He'd unwittingly followed a crowd as they filtered into a town square where apparently everyone was stopping. Music started playing, and every single person around him started singing. Startled, Nolan quickly realized they were singing about our sky friends, and he was the only one who didn't already know the words. "Stranger," the woman said. Nolan had already been moving away from her. He renewed his effort, but realized the crowd was just too tight to move through unnoticed. "Stranger," she yelled again. Others started to take notice. Another woman joined in, "Stranger." Then others, as the crowd started to pull away from Nolan. More people began yelling, "Stranger! There's a stranger here!" Finally, the music stopped and the commotion around Nolan began to swell. Nolan threw off his coat, revealing himself. He pulled his blaster and dropped it on his jacket. He held his hands up, showing he meant no harm. The crowd fell silent, a mixture of fear and curiosity rippling through the gathered faces. Nolan, his hands still raised, scanned the sea of people surrounding him. Their features were a blend of the indigenous population he remembered and the former Borg he'd left behind generations ago. "I mean you no harm," Nolan said, his voice carrying across the suddenly quiet square. I'm an old friend from the sky." A murmur swept through the crowd. An older man, maybe in his late 50s, a village elder, pushed his way to the front. His eyes narrowed as he studied Nolan. "Tell us who you are, stranger," the man said, his voice quavering. "No one has come from the sky for a very long time." Nolan nodded, slowly lowering his hands. "That's right. My name is Nolan Mercer. I'm sorry it's been so long, but I came back to see how you were doing." He looked around at the crowd. "For decades I've wondered how you all made out." The elder looked Nolan over with skepticism. "You claim you've been here before?" The tension in the air dissipated somewhat. "I have met you people before. I delivered the initial group of Borg refugees on the northern continent." Nolan looked down, "and I apologize to all of you for taking so long to return." "But why now? Why after all this time?" Nolan's expression softened. I didn't know if you'd survived. When I saw the damage to the planet, I feared the worst. The big shake, we call it, nearly destroyed us all. But it also brought us together, though," the man explained. "We needed each other to survive climate changes that followed the shake, Borg and locals alike." "Tell us," the young woman urged. "Tell us what happened. Why did the planet change so suddenly?" Nolan swallowed hard, guilt washing over him. "I'm afraid that was my doing. I didn't realize the consequences my actions would have on your world." A hush fell over the crowd. The village elder waved them away. "Our gathering is over, folks. Why don't we head home for the night, okay?" He called out to the crowd, which had already begun to get over the evening's excitement. The elder, the woman, and a few others joined as they walked toward a common building. Nolan began to explain the events that led to the creation of the Necrit expanse. As he spoke, he could see the mix of emotions playing across their faces: wonder, fear, and a growing understanding, a little anger. When the climate changed so drastically, the local people on the southern continent were struggling to find food, and the former Borg were struggling to stay warm. My grandmother was one of the Borg who flew a craft here, to the southern continent. She made the first contact. You gave us a chance, which was more than our predecessors had on that barren rock they were trapped on. Then, unknowingly, you gave us the opportunity to forge a new society together. We owe you a great debt." Nolan shook his head. "No, I owe you an apology. I should have come back sooner, should have made sure you were safe." The young woman stepped closer. "Perhaps. But look at what we've built. We've taken the best of both our peoples and created something new. Something beautiful." As Nolan looked around, he began to see the truth in her words. The town, while simple, was a harmonious blend of technologies and traditions. The people, once complete strangers, now stood united and blended. "I'd like to learn more," Nolan said, "about how you've survived, how you've thrived. And I'd like to help if I can." The elder smiled. "Let's call it a night. In the morning we can take a proper tour and show you how our little society has thrived." As Nolan bedded down in the common building, his thoughts trailed off. He had come seeking answers, maybe even absolution. Instead, he found something he hadn't realized he was missing: hope. Not something Nolan tended to rely on, but it did reinvigorate the soul a little. A new sense of purpose began to take root. There were more like them out there. Borg and former Borg struggling to find their place. Perhaps this was the meaning he'd been searching for. The sun was setting the next day as Nolan made his way back to his beam-out point, his mind churning with everything he'd seen and heard. The harmonious society built by the former Borg and the indigenous people was impressive, but it didn't erase the weight of his actions or the years of absence. With a double tap of his comm badge, Nolan dematerialized, reappearing moments later in Carol's command center. He slumped into the command chair, his expression pensive. He hammered in the commands, and in a flash, Carol blinked back to the Havok's hold. Nolan made his way to the Havok's bridge, his steps heavy with the burden of newfound purpose. "Welcome back," Ilara said, her tone neutral. "How did the new ship, Carol, perform?" Nolan nodded absently, his mind clearly elsewhere. "So far, so good. I haven't really put her to task yet." Ilara studied him for a moment, noting his distracted demeanor. She had more questions, but thought better of it. Nolan moved to his console, pulling up star charts of the Delta Quadrant, banging away at thin air as he manipulated the controls, marking potential locations and making notes. Epilogue. Several hours later, Ilara's voice resonated through the comm, breaking the silence. "Nolan, do you have time to go over some things with me?" It was unusual for her to ask. Typically, she managed the day's business independently and informed Nolan of any issues with the ship as they arose. Nolan, engrossed in his displays and making edits to his data, replied distractedly, Sure. What's up?" He glanced up towards the ceiling as he spoke, a habit he'd developed, feeling as though Ilara were all around him. "We had talked a while back about creating a new interface. Do you remember?" Yeah," still tapping away. The silhouette of a woman began to form behind Nolan. "This is what I came up with." Ilara's voice now emanated from a singular, distinct location behind him, rather than from all around. Nolan quickly swiveled his chair around. Ilara's hologram stepped into the light. Ilara stood before him, a vision that straddled the line between human and something beautifully beyond. Auburn hair framed a face that was breathtakingly new. Bright, inquisitive eyes peered through stylish glasses, reflecting the intelligence that Nolan knew so well. Her form-fitting uniform in shades of gray and white accentuated every curve, a perfect blend of professionalism and allure. "Ilara," Nolan breathed, his heart racing. "Ilara." Nolan pushed down the urge to reach for her, to hold her tight. "You're incredible." A faint blush colored Ilara's cheeks, a remarkably human response. "I hope you'd approve," she said softly, fidgeting with her glasses. Nolan stood, drawn toward her as if by some invisible force. He drank her in slowly, taking in every detail. May I?" he asked, reaching out hesitantly. Ilara reached out, and Nolan gently took her hand in his. The warmth and solidity of her touch sent a jolt through him. You're so real, he murmured, marveling at the sensation. Advanced photonic manipulation, Elara explained, her voice carrying a hint of pride. She reached out, picking up a nearby pad with graceful ease. I can interact with the environment just like you've always belonged here, Nolan finished, his voice thick with emotion. Their eyes met, and for a moment the rest of the universe seemed to fade away. Nolan felt a surge of something he couldn't quite name, admiration, affection, and a spark of something much deeper. Elara, this isn't just an upgrade, he said softly. It's like you've changed the game completely. You've made my world a new reality. A radiant smile lit up Elara's face, her holographic eyes shimmering with warmth. I'm glad you feel that way, Nolan. I had hoped, but was uncertain how you'd react. Nolan grinned, his face awash with a mix of astonishment and sense of warmth he couldn't understand. React? Elara, you've left me speechless. And as you know, that doesn't happen often. There was a long pause as Nolan looked her over, shaking his head in near disbelief. We're going to have to get another chair,